Hi, I'm Charlie Matatuiela, and this is Left Behind Natives, the podcast that amplifies the voices of those too often left out of the story. Here, we'll uncover history, culture, and contemporary issues shaping Native lives today, one conversation at a time. Today, we're discussing Native Americans of today. Of course, we will have some episodes where we discuss some Native American history that may be of greater interest to many of you, because most people like to ignore the troubles of people going on today, and it's so much easier to consider that those troubles only happened in the past. But today's just once again a brief episode that we're going to be discussing some of these things about natives today, and you'll get to learn a little about how we struggle, achieve, grow, and aspire to be great as our ancestors, of course, once did. So during the upcoming podcast, we'll be discussing, meeting actually some of the people that shape Native American culture and activism, actors, writers. We may even have some people from my artist guild that I belong to, which is pretty nice. It's a state-recognized tribal artist guild, something that is very near and dear to me. But today natives look and do and think completely differently than we may have in the past. Of course, the fact of the matter is, once you get down the line, it seems like quite a few people have Native ancestry. And as I had mentioned previously, there have been great amounts of efforts that have gone into establishing the idea that Native people today, exist throughout American culture. Of course, Mexican culture, South American culture, and not belittling any groups of people, because in South America alone, there are still countless tribes today that flourish. And of course, one of my favorite countries of Brazil is packed with Native people, in case you didn't know. So a lot of people will, be more demonstrative or diminutive about these different cultures. And some people believe that people in Brazil are only Portuguese, which is a silly notion, because that's simply the language that they speak today, just like many people call Mexican Spanish. A lot of people call them Latin. And honestly, I don't feel like any of these titles that are given to people today really cover who they are, because in my experience and the travels I've had through Mexico, not to mention my grandmother's people in Panama, we really ignore the fine details of who many of these people are. So we'll be discussing that, of course, down the road as well. But today there are a few topics that I'd like to point out, and some of them are common misconceptions about Native American life in this modern era. A lot of people still use metaphors of teepees and long hair language, and one of my favorite is, that we're all born knowing all Native American history and culture. And that's a silly notion, to say the least. Oftentimes, Native Americans that have no experience with their culture, no idea or mindset as what a Native American is today, are often looked at as a guide, or even better yet, a expert in the case subject and in the subject material. And of course, this may not be the case. So, this is something that's really got to be important to you in order to be able to discuss it, or to listen to it for that matter. So this topic is something that has really set home with me. It is critical to Native Americans making it in this culture today, in modern America, or wherever they may live. I do know Native Americans that live out of the country, of course, and off of the island, as we call it, that are not in the Americas today. So there are some of these things that we'll be discussing in other episodes, but also in this one we'll be addressing some of those stereotypes, which are just atrocious. But in some cases those stereotypes might hold a little bit of truth. So my personal experience with Native American stereotypes is always that natives have long hair, or that natives, uh, you know, smoke something in a pipe, or that we all use what so many others. Oh my gosh, the people of Hollywood have called a peace pipe. Some of that just eats me up. And of course, today in today's American society, many people, even natives, still use and keep these metaphors, if you would, or stereotypes, if you rather, keep them alive. So we're going to be discussing some of those things as well. And of course, myself, I do have long hair, but does it represent my culture, my people, my whatever today? It's actually a lot more deep than that. So a lot of people today believe that Native American culture is more or less an ideology, or it plays a role in how we think today. And while that does hold true for a lot of us, does it really hold true for all of us? I'd like to say no. Honestly, I believe that a lot of Native American youth today, especially, are mentally in about the same place as much of the rest of the youth of the Americas. Um, Especially here in the United States, our culture, what we consider to be an American culture, has certain ideas at play that honestly, if you have ever met young Native Americans going to college, they seem to have a lot of the same ideas that non-Native Americans going to college today have as well. And a lot of the ideas that we have are about identity. And identity has become such an important topic in the 2020s in the United States, and of course in Mexico, that identity can determine who you are. And I've even seen where people outside of certain cultures identify as that particular culture, even though they may admittedly have no blood tie to this group, and of course didn't grow up in that particular group or what have you. But that's not what we're here talking about today. Identity is really still, in my opinion, overused as an identifier for who you are. It is more of a idea than the reality of what's inside of who you are, and in that particular way, who you identify as and what have you. In once again the 2020s, identity has changed its meaning, and your identity may reflect about numerous things that you have that you don't really have time to explain to someone on a casual meeting, but yet you believe that they are so important to you and who you are. So, this really just kind of diving into what the realities of Native Americans are going through today. We really have to think about what it is that is affecting them, personally, but also culturally. And in some ways, culture has been erased. In a great many ways, of course, culture is being eroded, and the lack of, speaking our native languages is really of concern. There's a lot of things to unpack there, but what it boils down to is the person today a reflection, and not necessarily I would say a 1-to-1 ratio of who our ancestors were, but is it a reflection of who our ancestors were in the long term, and then of course in more recent times, say your great-grandparents, for example, or who your parents were and who you are. That really is the critical and most important thing about who natives are today. And quite a few people claim Native American ancestry, whether they can prove it or not. And truthfully, should you have to prove it? Those are questions that we'll be covering in a later episode as well. But I'd like to stop right now and say, I don't feel myself that it is necessary for me to prove who I am today. I have been challenged personally myself I've been challenged by other natives, more so than non-natives, and it's just a sign of the times. It's really how people um, like to show superiority over other people by suggesting that you are or you're not different types of Native people. Like I said, this is something we'll get into more in depth down the road, but trying to keep this as, I guess, socially correct as I possibly can. I would like to say that the youth of today, the Native youth specifically, have decided themselves, in many cases, the gatekeepers of Native American culture, while simultaneously not necessarily knowing much about Native American culture and not preaching that culture. They're preaching, the claim to that culture, the claim to fame, if you would, but not necessarily showing you what that culture actually is. So there's a lot of things that we could get into in that particular case, but like I said, this episode is more about who Native people are today, what we've been doing, and how we survive in this era. So natives, of course, typically don't live in teepees today. There are probably 200 or 300 that might argue that some of us still live in old style homes and what have you. I do know some southeastern Native Americans who would argue that a mobile home is similar to a longhouse. And of course, there may be some people having walked the walk and know what it's like living in a tent, saying that is very much like people who once lived in a teepee. And there are, of course, impoverished people that might do this, as well as that just make that choice. I'll never forget a friend of mine has passed on a long time ago, but his name was Red Blanket, and he lost his family. He was a very wealthy and very, I guess, successful would be the word we'd use in American culture today, person. He was a Native American that lived the life of what growing up as a kid I would have said would have been the white man's way of life. And he was very successful. He worked in a giant office and made, like I said, lots of money, had a wife and a child, and he lost them. And when he lost them, that's when he realized and felt the need to come back to his roots. And so he decided to live on the streets. And I'll be honest with you, I can tell you stories about my own existence that are similar. But my friend Red Blanket, he lived on the streets and was very proud of who he was, and unfortunately taken advantage of by so many people on so many levels. And his culture of who he was really shined in his pain in his life. And like I said, many of us do that. Many of us live that way. And there are those of us who go along planting our tobacco and raising our crops and taking care of our people in the way that suits us best. So there are a lot of extremes, truthfully. There are countless extremes of one thing or the other. And this should be important to you, because if you're familiar with, or if you want to become familiar with, or if you're trying to learn about Native Americans or Native American culture, these kind of things, these should be topics that are important to you, where we are today and how we're surviving, and the ones of us that survive on, the grounds of making a living by, I don't want to say exploiting our culture, but doing something that is cultural and finding a way to make a living at it. And there are actors today, Native American actors, that are doing that. There are musicians, Native American musicians, who are doing that. My business, which I mentioned in the first video, I actually make what people call Native American flutes today. And what is a Native American flute? If you've ever seen any of my videos, or if you're a follower from my YouTube channel or any of my other social media, and you've come here to this platform to visit with us today, you know what I do, and you'll know that I stress the fact that There are original historic flutes that are being made, and there are ones that are a reflection of those flutes. And then there are ones that are a far cry from what those flutes may have actually represented. And that's something that people forget about, is the small things, the tiny parts of culture that are so significant, so important, things that you know many people believe is the overwhelming foreshadowing, or the actually what that thing is, which has become a stereotype of sorts. Um, in my business, I help millions of people play a musical instrument that is a reflection of what the historical musical instrument was. And this instrument, it helps them find peace, really. If there ever was a peace pipe, I think that the Native American flutes that we and so many other people make today, I think, using the word pipe as a flute instead of a implement of smoking tobacco in, I believe that that flute is probably as close to a peace pipe as you can find. So there's a lot of diversity among Native communities today. There are Native communities of people who are all enveloped in business. Sometimes there'll be two or three that may hold deep admiration for cultural origin and how their people did things, but oftentimes, they'll be enveloped in that business as well in some way, shape, or form. So the diversity of Native communities is just astounding. There are urban natives, which is a really a phrase that people use a lot in Native American community today. There are rural natives. There are natives that only live on reservations, and there are a lot of us that are satellites of our culture and our people that live far beyond the reach. And in my particular case, I can tell you that having Native ancestry on both my mother's and father's side of the family, and on my mother's side of the family and my mother's father's side of the family, and my dad's side of the family, so many different kinds of Native people. I could pick a single community and live with those people, but I don't. I live more what I guess other natives looking at would say isolated. But reality, with the travels that my wife and my family and I have had, we feel ourselves more or less, living with all of our people. We just kind of split that time up amongst different groups, I think is how it works out for us. But, respect to those that can stay with one group of people on their reservation or their land, or that live in a city that is mainly, of one Native American community or another. It's a big thing. It's a powerful thing to stay in one place. My wife and I, just as my grandparents and all of my great grandparents, my gosh, the migrations that they made from Pennsylvania to Virginia, and from Virginia to North Carolina and Tennessee, and from North Carolina and Tennessee to Georgia, and from Georgia to Alabama, and so on and so forth. And then my grandparents finally to Florida, and my parents in Florida for most of their time, till my mother found the need to go back to my dad's homeland in North Alabama and stay there. And then finally when she passed, my ties with so many of my people in North Alabama, but really all over the place. Like I say, it's important to me to recognize and know who I am and where I come from. And there are natives like that today. There really are. Some of us that have multiple cultural ties to our people here in the Americas that we find so critical and so important. I'll give you a fine example. My wife's father's family from Michoacan, Mexico, that they're so tied together. There's the mausoleum where her grandparents and great-grandparents are kept. It's amazing to me. I've been to so many burial sites of my greats and great-greats and great-great-greats, and I've looked at their burial sites, but they're all over the place. They're in Virginia and North Carolina. They're in Pennsylvania, buried in parts of Ohio. But when I look at her family, it's amazing to me that they have stayed in one place. And I've been beneficial enough to have seen a Michoacano or Pitapesha burial procession. I was talking to my friend Michelle earlier. He says, "When are you coming back?" And I'm like, "Well, Jesse and I talk about moving to Mexico all the time, especially when we retire." And I think to myself, is that where I'm going to be buried? I don't know. I really don't know. But, in modern Native American communities today, and the diversity that we all share, and the adversity that we share, some of us have a place that we call home. And, I fear for modern Native youth, because the place that they call home is an idea that may or may not, I should say. I'll leave that one open to speculation. It may or may not exist. There is a balancing act between traditional and modern community and ideas and identity today. And there are a lot of very angry, oh my gosh, I'll remember being that very angry Native youth. I'll never forget, and I'm not going to share it, so don't don't think if you look it up you can find it. But I remember reading, and I've quoted it when I've spoken in public, and of course I've quoted it probably in some videos on my Flute YouTube channel. But I'll never forget rereading, after having a family of my own, the school newspaper story where me and about 5 other Native American youth in my high school were interviewed. And it was an amazing interview. But I look at all those people today, and one of them who was a Chiricahua Apache friend of mine. Don't ask me what he was doing in Pensacola, Florida. I have some ideas, but he was a great guy, and really powerful influence on my idea of who I was. And I see him there smiling. And then I see all the other ones, some of them kind of questionable ideas maybe running through their minds when they had their picture taken in this interview. And I looked so angry. Oh my gosh, I was so angry. I fear that today, Native American youth is that me when I was 17, 16 years old. I fear that all of them today are that person that was me back in those days when I was so angry. Of course, I'm nowhere near that person today. I don't know if it's education or exposure to life or what have you, but that's nowhere near the person that I am today. Not remotely angry about those kind of issues as I was as a teenage Native American youth. There are a lot of people today that focus on one or two aspects of Native American culture. Some of them spend a lot of time trying to preserve our language, and I say our language. I'm using the word language as a plural. As all native languages, whichever language it is that they're trying to preserve. Myself, I don't really do well to preserve languages. I speak several modern languages today, and I know a couple of my family's languages. I lived with, we lived in Oklahoma for a while, and you can't help but pick up those kind of things. And of course, even growing up in Northwest Florida, I was surrounded by a lot of Muskogee Indian people, and have attended lots of Muskogee Indian ceremonies and what have you. And you can't help but pick up some of the language here or there. But it's not my thing. I'm not into preserving language. I wish I was. I'm thankful that I see that little twinkle in some of my kids' eyes. They see that it's very important. And, I appreciate my mom's family's language. It's the basis for so many other native languages. It makes it easy to understand things, but it delves into my own personal research that I've done in researching Native Americans' culture and what have you. Here's a book I thought might be of interest. It's called The Popol Vuh. And if you want to see how to spell that, it's Popolvuh. And I never forget how my friend that I'm going to be interviewing on an upcoming episode, how he pronounces this. And he's, of course, from Guatemala. He is a Quiche Mayan, and he calls it the Popol Vuh. And it's how he pronounces the vu sound. And I do a little bit myself pronounce it vu. I can hear that letter coming through, but I think it's just my experience with all the languages that I have. But when I look at this word, I can see some of what it is what the word means. And as I thumb through this book, this is an ancient Native American book, by the way. It's one of about not quite 40 that survived the conquest. But when I thumbed through it earlier before, I was trying to decide if this is something I wanted to discuss in this video, I seen some words in here, and words today that some of you may or may not know, like the deity Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl was a deity, I'd like to say, from Mexico. But in this book, the Popol Vuh, they speak of Quetzalcoatl and Kukulkan. And Kukulkan actually comes from a language that I'm familiar with. And when I look at that, I can see what it means, and I see the importance of what the name of this deity, Kukulkan, this god, if that's what you want to call him, when I see the importance of what that is, I can understand it because of my study of my mom's family's language. And I understand how significant this is. So studying native languages is important. It's just unfortunately not my forte. I would have spent my entire life doing that instead of speaking like I am to you today about Native American culture and how important it is that we preserve as much of it as we possibly can. I do have friends who study and protect native languages today, and there are a lot of people that actually do this regularly. As a matter of fact, the Cherokee language, for example, I think probably in the United States is one of the most well-known, studied, preserved, and spoken languages, although it is still, like anything, it's potentially a dying language if it's not protected and taken care of. But today groups of Cherokee people actually get together and vote on new words. So it's not dying in the respect that people have found a way to keep it alive and add to it, which is amazing. The Sioux language is similar. People do add to it, and it's an effort that it takes to do this. But there are, instead of being 300 or so words in the Sioux language today, there's 600 or 800 words in it, because we have new words like airplane and automobile, drug dealer, and crazy things, politician, things that we don't like to talk about sometimes, but things that that are challenging people today, and for that reason it finds its way in our languages. Social media, for example, has made a huge impact on Native American culture today. There are social media, I guess, influencers that are Native. Some of them positive, some of them, maybe focusing on the less positive aspects of things, but some of them are hilarious, keeping up the tradition that some great Native American comedians had brought to light and made happen for us. They're keeping it alive today, which is amazing. Which reminds me, there is, of course, a Native American Comedians Guild, which is is amazing that such a thing can exist. But I do find myself following and enjoying, some Native American social media comedians today. They I think shine a light on both the positive and negative, but in such a way that it's constructive and positive, as comedy tends to do. There are so many challenges facing Native American cultures today. That's not what this episode's about. If it was, it would be hours long. Economic disparities, employment challenges. To be honest with you, thanks to things similar to affirmative action, and for the time I believe that perhaps, I'm not really sure, I've seen studies for and against the DEI concept that had ran through the last probably 6 or so years of United States American culture, or rather the American culture in the United States. I don't know how you really would say that, because the U.S. has its own culture that's different from the rest of the Americas. But with the whole diversity, equity, inclusion thing, I'll be honest with you, I was shocked. And it really challenged my own personal ideas about people today when a Native American leader came to me and asked me what they should do with regards to DEI within their organization. And I'm thinking to myself, that's crazy. That's insane that you're asking me about DEI, about diversity, equity, inclusion in your business, because you are diversity, equity, and inclusion. I just don't get it. But the ideas are so out there for some people that they don't understand what exactly they need to be doing. Native American healthcare, for example, it's troubling. It really is. If you want to know about Native American healthcare today, ask a Native that lives on a reservation or one that's a member of a federally recognized tribe, and ask them what they do for healthcare. I'm not here to bash any services today, because, I'm glad that we have whatever we have. And do we need more? Yeah, we do. We do need more. When I was younger, I was introduced to an organization that would have paid my way to go to school to be a Native American doctor. And that wasn't my thing. It wasn't even remotely my thing, I'm interested in my health, of course. My family and I are very, very health conscious about what we eat, what we do, our exercise practices, both things that we do that might be cultural, that might be modern. We're very concerned about all of this, and we do pretty good to take care of our health. At the time of this video, I can tell you that my wife and I don't believe in seeing doctors. I hope that that's an idea that I'm going to be able to maintain for the rest of my life. I know that my grandparents did it. My parents, not so much, for the most part, but not so much. My mom always talked a big talk about hating doctors, but then she would turn around and go and take all their medication that they gave her. But she would preach against it, which is neat to me. I'm not telling you that I'm not here to give you medical advice, but that was my mom. Healthcare is trouble. One of my dear friends, who I'm looking forward to interviewing for this podcast, is a Native American who lives close proximity to his people, but he's interested in taking care of urban Native healthcare. And he had started some organizations, and I'll need to get some clarification from him on that. Like I say, I'm looking forward to interviewing him about what it is that he does. He's an amazing guy, and just really one of those natives that tries his best to take care of his people, and I admire that. I really do. He is working in taking care of their health. When you talk about Native Americans and medicine, there are two kinds of medicine to Native American people today. There's the medicine that you take, medication. My family and I are big, big time, I guess, proponents of the concept of what native medicine actually is, having come from some medicine peoples. But medication is the stuff that you take that the doctor gives you that is supposed to make you healthy or keep you alive. That's medication. Medicine is the thing that you put in your body to make you, good. And that doesn't necessarily mean that those two are synonymous with one another. So, like I said, I'll look forward to interviewing my friend for this episode that we're going to do about Native American health and what have you, and hear some of the trials and tribulations that he's been through, which, like myself, he's been ridiculed by other natives. And a lot of times when you're outspoken, you're oftentimes the subject of other people's troubles. So there we are. But there are other issues in Native American communities today, like legal and sovereignty battles. There's issues, especially with unrecognized tribes and state-recognized tribes trying to battle for their sovereignty. Oftentimes you'll hear federally recognized tribes talking about maintaining their sovereignty or trying to claim their sovereignty. And it goes that way all the way up the totem pole, if you'll accept the metaphor there. And the people at the top still feel like they need more sovereignty. And I believe that idea is one that just American, United States American culture really could claim itself about sovereignty. Sovereignty is very, very important to all of us, but not everybody knows what sovereignty means. Native Americans typically know what sovereignty means, and I will tell you that in my struggles in life, having been a member of a state-recognized tribe for so very, very long, that the sovereignty for state-recognized tribes or unrecognized tribes, or even tribes that are outside of the United States, and their sovereignty, especially within the United States, like I mentioned Mexico, for example. Not all the people that live in Mexico are Mexicans. Not all the people that live in Mexico descend from the Mexica tribe that eventually, encapsulated most of the country. But sovereignty is trouble, and it's a battle. A lot of people are trying to fight for land rights and ICWA, Indian Child Welfare rights and what have you, and then sometimes somebody throws us a bone, like there was a ruling that took place in Oklahoma not too long ago called the McGirt case. And we could discuss that here, but really I don't really want to. It's not one of my favorite things to discuss, although it has, in my opinion, helped to afford numerous groups of people, specifically Muskogee, Oklahoma. It's helped them gain some real traction when it comes to sovereignty, and being able to claim their rights and what have you. Now, a lot of other tribes, of course, immediately once this case passed, a lot of other tribes find that ruling useful, and they are citing it now. Of course, I mentioned that a lot of Native American tribes are business-oriented, and many of them are actually law-oriented. There are some tribes I look at them and all I see is lawyers, and I don't see any people going to ceremonial dances or anything. I just see a bunch of attorneys there, and that's cool. I mean, an attorney is an important role in Native American community today. But like I say, there are a lot of different kinds of Native Americans in our world today doing a lot of different jobs. A lot of the stereotypes that we have to suffer through. A lot of people pat their mouth and say woo, 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 and what have you, and the struggles of the people who have fought against Native American mascots. At this point in my life, I can't say, and I know this is going to put me on a lot of the bad lists of Native Americans alive today, but I can't say that mascots are a good or a bad thing. We all have our own mascots that we look onto, and some of them that we hate, and some of them that we like, and what have you. But whether that means that is it right for a ball team to claim Native American as their mascot? Well, I can tell you about certain vehicles out there and the tribute that those vehicle manufacturers paid to people to put those names on things. I can't say I'm for or against it. I really can't. But like I say, a lot of things that you may not have been thinking about, innovations in business and technology that are actually things made by Native Americans. You may want to search who it is that invented the French fry or the potato chip and get some ideas about what Native Americans did today. Somebody the other day was asking me about cultural appropriation with regards to the flutes that I make. And is it correct for a non-native to play a Native American flute? And I told her, I said, I've been wanting a nickel every time someone uses a square of toilet paper for the longest time. Toilet paper isn't something that the Europeans were attributed with knowing about when they arrived in the Americas. And Native Americans did look at Europeans as being incredibly nasty. Nasty in ways that I simply cannot describe, at least not in good faith here in this video. So, I'll never forget the one law that the Queen of England created way back in the day. I had a copy of it. I used to keep it hanging up at my desk at one of my jobs I worked at with a lot of people around me. This law said that Europeans, specifically English, were not to ever follow the Native American way and take a bath every day. That might give you a little food for thought. But anyway, I do know of the Native American stereotypes that are used against us, calling us dirty Indians, or they'll call people dirty Mexicans. Oh, you add dirty to whatever you want to and call a group of people that, and that's how people believe it. This is where history being written by the conqueror really comes into play. But there are so many things that we could go into in this particular episode, like I say, but we will save and break so many of those up into future episodes so I can keep this into an affordable time limit that you have, feel like you have time for and that you want to listen to. But just give you a idea of what you can do, how you can support Native American communities today. My recommendation is, unless you're a multi-billionaire and just feel like Native American people have really had a bad rap and we deserve better, if you're a billionaire, you need to find all of us and pay all of us. Okay, that's how you could do that. But if you live in an area, for example, if you live in California, I can tell you right now, I know some of the Native American peoples as a group who are going through some massive struggles. One group of them specifically in the San Francisco area that are having some really hard times right now. And it's not that you need to send these people clothing or give them some food or anything, but you might want to look into what their struggles are. If they haven't resolved those issues by the time this video and audio podcast come out, you may want to search Native Americans living in San Francisco and find out who live there and find out what they have going on. I will tell you, they've had a pretty rough time taking care of some problems that they face today. And the problems aren't food or clothing oriented. I hear about people taking lots of clothing out to the various reservations, and there are people who are financially struggling in such a way that is a big help. There really are. But if you're interested, like I say, find out about the Native communities in your area. If you're in Virginia, I had mentioned earlier, I've got family from there. Or if you're in North Carolina, there are numerous Native American tribes today alive, and I won't say flourishing, like I say, struggling as many of us are doing in North Carolina, but that doesn't mean that those are the only natives in the world. They're not. There are Native people here in Alabama. You'll find them in Louisiana. You'll find that there are Native people all over the United States and the Americas, and we do all have a struggle. So if you want to find out how you can help That's one way to do it. Another way is to make sure you do your research before you buy any Native American products that are considered to be Native American made. This is actually one that I try to do with Native people. I'll find oftentimes that Native Americans will buy some really cool looking Native American clothing today. They'll buy it from some company in Australia that is just basically taking advantage of them. They will do that, and unfortunately, because of flexibility of certain laws, as long as the people selling that product in the United States isn't calling it Native American, there's no Native American law that's going to stop people from selling a shirt with a wolf on the side of it that has some kind of feathery logo or motif that catches people's eye. And two, there is the Native American Arts and Crafts Act. This is a law that I have upheld my life, and I have spoken on behalf of and with and to and for, and have been part of the people who have shaped it today. And this law is something you might want to find out about. If you're interested in buying Native American arts and crafts, you need to look into that. It's better to buy it from Native people. And like I said, the state recognized Tribal Artists Guild, the little link that's on my website for this podcast, as well as the outro to these videos. If you're watching the videos and anywhere else that I might post them, look into them. They are good people. They follow strict laws, and they are very good at what they do. And many of them are great Native American artists that are shaping the world today. So definitely keep an eye out for that. But otherwise, that's it for this episode of Left Behind Natives. The voices of our people don't fade. They echo. Keep listening, keep learning, and keep the fire of our stories burning. Thanks again for joining us here today. Once again, I'm Charlie Montetoyel, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.